What if everything you thought you knew about Darkrai was wrong? We've been taught to see this Pokemon as a shadowy villain, a creature that creeps into the dreams of the innocent to inflict nightmares. But what if that's the biggest misconception in the entire Sinnoh legend? The truth is far more tragic. What if Darkrai's terrifying power isn't a weapon it wields, but a curse it bears? And what if those nightmares are not an attack, but a desperate, misunderstood defense mechanism? This is the story the Pokedex hints at but never fully reveals, a story of forced isolation and a being forever punished for a power it never asked for. Let's investigate the evidence that proves Darkrai isn't a monster, but one of Pokemon's most tragic heroes. The foundation of Darkrai's tragedy is written plainly in its own Pokedex entries, if you know how to read between the lines.
And there's his Darkrai!
Darkrai, the Pitch-Black Pokémon! Darkrai can cause people and Pokémon to have nightmares!
The entries don't describe a malicious creature. They describe a prisoner. Let's look at the evidence. The Diamond Pokedex entry states, it can lull people to sleep and make them dream. It is active during nights of the new moon. Notice the language, lull people to sleep. This is passive, almost gentle. It doesn't say attack or invade. The real key comes from Pokemon Platinum. To protect itself, it afflicts those around it with nightmares. However, it never appears before people. This is absolutely critical. The Pokedex itself uses the phrase to protect itself. This frames the nightmare ability not as an offensive tool, but as a defensive reaction. It's a shield, not a sword. And then there's the most heartbreaking line, repeated across generations. However, it never appears before people. This isn't the behavior of a predator. This is the behavior of a creature that knows its very presence is a danger to others. It has chosen a life of complete exile to minimize the harm its curse causes. It doesn't seek out humans, it actively avoids them. This theme of isolation is consistent. The black and white entries add another layer, calling it a pitch-black Pokemon that haunts people's dreams. But again, the implication is of an involuntary state, a haunting that is part of its nature, not its choice. This lore-based portrait is brought to life in the anime film Pokémon: The Rise of Darkrai. This portrayal is essential to understanding its true character. In the movie, Darkrai is initially blamed for causing a crisis in Alamos Town. The citizens fear it, seeing only the nightmares it inadvertently causes. But as the story unfolds, we see Darkrai's true colors. When the space-time continuum is threatened by a clash between Dialga and Palkia, Darkrai doesn't flee. It doesn't use the chaos as cover. Instead, it repeatedly puts itself in harm's way to protect the town and its people, even though those same people fear and hunt it. It fights to defend a community that wants it gone. This is not a villain. This is a guardian burdened with a power that makes its heroism look like a threat. This brings us to its eternal counterpart, Cresselia. We're taught to see them as simple rivals, the bringer of bad dreams versus the bringer of good dreams. But this duality is misleading. Cresselia is celebrated. It's associated with the full moon, a symbol of light and clarity. People seek out its feathers as a cure, a blessing. Darkrai, bound to the new moon, a symbol of darkness and the unknown, is shunned. Its existence is the problem that Cresselia gets to solve. This contrast isn't about good versus evil, it's about acceptance versus ostracization. Cresselia operates in the open, a welcomed savior. Darkrai is forced to operate from the shadows, its protective actions misinterpreted as aggression. It's a prisoner of the narrative that casts it as the antagonist in its own story. Even the manga depictions reinforce this. In Pokemon Adventures, Darkrai is shown to be deeply connected to its home, a protector of the area around the lunar wing. Its actions, while sometimes causing conflict, stem from a place of defending its territory and the balance within it, not from a desire to cause harm. When you piece together the Pokedex, the anime, and the manga, a consistent pattern emerges. The evidence points not to a malevolent force, but to a tragic figure. A Pokemon whose very nature is a curse that forces it into exile. A being that tries to protect others only to be feared by them. It's an unwilling prisoner of its own power, forever misunderstood. So, if Darkrai isn't malicious, what is the real purpose of its terrifying power? The evidence points to a heartbreaking reality. The nightmares are a defense mechanism, a biological alarm system that Darkrai cannot control. Think of it this way. Many animals in our world have defense mechanisms. A skunk sprays a foul odor, a porcupine raises its quills. These aren't acts of aggression. They are desperate, last resort warnings meant to scare away a potential threat without causing serious physical harm. Darkrai's nightmares function in the exact same way. The Pokedex entry from Platinum gave us the crucial clue. To protect itself, it afflicts those around it with nightmares. This isn't a choice, it's an involuntary reaction, like a sneeze or a flinch. But what threat is it so desperately trying to protect itself from? The answer lies in its own tragic existence. Darkrai's greatest fear isn't Cresselia or any other Pokemon. Its greatest fear is connection. Every living thing has a fundamental need for community, but for Darkrai, community is poison. Its power activates proximitively. It doesn't target individuals with malice. Its nightmare aura simply emanates outward, affecting anyone who gets too close. This means the only way for Darkrai to prevent harming others is to ensure no one ever gets close. The nightmares are its way of screaming "stay back" to a world it secretly wishes it could join. It's a lonely, self-imposed quarantine. This theory is powerfully supported by its behavior in The Rise of Darkrai. Throughout the film, Darkrai doesn't actively hunt people down to give them bad dreams. The nightmares occur when people encroach on its territory or when it's forced to be near a population center to deal with the larger threat. The nightmares are a side effect of its presence, an unavoidable consequence of it being in the vicinity. When it fights to protect Alamos Town, it's knowingly causing distress to the very people it's saving. Imagine the psychological toll of that, knowing that your every attempt to help causes temporary suffering. It's a heroic act that always looks like an attack. This connects to a broader theme in Pokemon mythology: balance. The world isn't simply divided into good and evil, it's a system of complementary forces. Dialga controls time, Palkia controls space. One cannot exist without the other. Cresselia embodies pleasant dreams and lunar light, while Darkrai embodies the necessary, often frightening, process of the subconscious. We need to dream, and that includes processing fears and anxieties. Darkrai's role might be to facilitate that crucial, darker side of dreaming, a role that is essential but thankless. It manages the shadowy corners of the mind so that Cresselia's light can shine brighter. But while Cresselia is thanked, Darkrai is cursed for doing its part. Furthermore, there's evidence that Darkrai actively tries to minimize the harm. Its association with the new moon is key. The new moon is the darkest night, when human activity is naturally lowest. By being most active when people are least likely to be out and about, it strategically reduces the chances of an accidental encounter. It chooses the time of least risk. This isn't the behavior of a monster lying in wait. It's the behavior of a creature meticulously managing its curse. It seeks the empty spaces, the forgotten corners, all in an effort to contain the fallout of its own existence. The ultimate tragedy is that Darkrai is seemingly aware of its curse and takes active, intelligent steps to mitigate it, yet it receives no credit for this restraint, only blame for the harm it couldn't prevent. To truly grasp the depth of Darkrai's tragedy, we need to compare it to other legendary Pokemon often associated with darkness or destruction. This comparison reveals why Darkrai's burden is uniquely heartbreaking. Take Giratina, for example. Giratina is the ruler of the distortion world, a being of antimatter and chaos. It's certainly feared, but it has a domain. It has a purpose. It is a master of its environment, and its power is integral to the balance of the Pokemon universe. Being feared is part of its job description. Giratina's isolation is a form of sovereignty. Then consider Yveltal, the destruction Pokemon. When Yveltal's life ends, it absorbs the life force of every living thing around it. This is undeniably catastrophic, but it's also presented as a natural, cyclical event. It's not personal. Yveltal isn't misunderstood, it's a force of nature, like a volcano or an earthquake. Its destructive power is part of a grand rebirth cycle alongside Xerneas. It is feared, but its role is accepted as a fundamental, if terrifying, part of the world's order. Darkrai stands in stark contrast to both. It doesn't rule a domain like Giratina, it is exiled from every domain. It doesn't perform a grand cyclical function like Yveltal. Its power causes small, personal, and deeply traumatic incidents, bad dreams, that serve no obvious greater good. Its power is constant, involuntary, and socially isolating. The key difference is the nature of the fear. People fear Giratina and Yveltal for their immense, world-altering power. They fear Darkrai for something much more intimate, the violation of the mind, the one place we feel should be safe. This makes its ostracization more profound. It's not just feared, it's personally reviled for a curse it cannot lift. Giratina has a world to rule. Yveltal has a destiny to fulfill. Darkrai has only a curse to bear, and the crushing loneliness that comes with it. So, the story of Darkrai is not one of a nightmare bringer, but of a tragic guardian. Its power is a shield that looks like a weapon, a defense mechanism that forces it into a life of solitude. It is a hero whose every attempt to protect is misinterpreted as an attack, a Pokémon punished for a curse it never chose. The true cost of its power isn't the fear it instills in others, but the eternal isolation it must endure to keep them safe.